Today, we're going to get a really personal look into the Vietnam War. This isn't a story about generals and strategies, but about what it was actually like on the ground. We're talking survival, brotherhood, and a homecoming that, well, it shaped an entire generation. We're going to see the war through the eyes of one soldier, Michael Surfer Lansford, from the 101st Airborne, and we'll be using his own words to guide us.
And this one sentence right here, it just perfectly captures what this is all about. For Lansford and for so many others, the war didn't just end when they got on the plane to go home. No way. It was a chapter that would echo through the rest of their lives. It was a place you could leave, for sure, but a place that would never, ever leave you.
So you have to ask, how could any kid be ready for something like that? Well, for Michael Lansford, his entire childhood, in a strange way, was like an unknowing training ground for the jungles of Vietnam.
Just look at this timeline. It shows a life of constant change and, frankly, a lot of hardship. Lansford grew up on the move, never really staying in one school for very long. He lived out on a remote ranch in New Mexico where his Navajo neighbors taught him how to track, how to hunt, how to just live off the land. By the time he was 10, he was already working and hunting in the rice fields on the Texas coast. And then, the day after he graduated high school in 1968, he got his draft notice.
And this quote just brilliantly connects those two worlds for us. It's kind of surreal, right? To him, the rice paddies in Vietnam felt just like the ones he'd hunted in back home. That feeling of always needing to survive. He'd known that his whole life. The only thing that was new, now people were constantly shooting at him.
So that rugged childhood led him right into the realities of Vietnam. Lansford describes the jungle in these incredibly simple, brutal terms. You were either the predator or you were the prey. That's it. The daily struggle was just relentless. Try to imagine the constant, crushing heat mixed with a smell he says you can never, ever forget, the smell of death. Soldiers would get covered in leeches just from crossing a stream. They were dealing with cobras and tigers that Lansford estimated were around 500 pounds. And that's before you even get to the man-made horrors, booby traps, napalm that literally suffocated the air, and white phosphors that would burn right through you. All of this under a jungle canopy so thick that daylight never even hit the ground. Survival meant you had to learn a whole new language, the language of the jungle. The soldiers got attuned into its natural rhythm, its chorus of sounds. And the most terrifying sound of all was silence. Because if the jungle went quiet, it meant the enemy was close. It meant the jungle itself was holding its breath. Of all the threats out there, the pressure mine was maybe the most psychologically cruel. The way Lansford describes it, if you stepped on one, you were faced with this impossible choice. As long as you kept your foot down, you were okay, but the second you moved, it was over. The only choice left for that soldier was when to die. But out of all that horror, an unbreakable bond was formed. Lansford talks about a brotherhood so deep, so profound, that men would give their lives for each other without a second thought. And it's this intense loyalty, the sense of family, that makes what happened when they got home even more jarring. Think about that for a second. They left a world where they had each other's backs, no matter what, only to land in a country that, for many of them, seemed to have turned its back on them. The contrast is just stark. In Vietnam, they were brothers. They were willing to die for each other. But back in the States, they were met with this cold, isolating silence, and a lot of times just outright hostility. There was nobody to talk to, nobody who could possibly understand what they'd been through. The advice they got as soon as they landed was blunt and immediate. Hide who you are. Don't tell anybody where you've been. Admitting you were a Vietnam veteran was, as Lansford put it, a real no-no. They were basically forced to bury a huge part of their own identity. And the rejection came from all sides. Protesters at the airport, employers who wouldn't hire them. And get this, even the VFW, an organization of fellow veterans, turned them away and called them losers. In Lansford's own small town, people wrote letters to his mother hoping he would be killed. The war wasn't over. The battlefield had just changed. And nothing shows the disconnect between the soldiers' code of honor and the indifference they sometimes faced better than this story. One morning, the body of a soldier who'd been killed in action was dropped on a landing pad, and he just lay there all day long. Nobody came for him. Michael Lansford just couldn't stand it. He sat with that fallen soldier all night, talking to him. When a mail chopper finally showed up the next morning and refused to take the body, Lansford locked and loaded his weapon.
He made it crystal clear this soldier was going home, and he was going with him. And for that act of honor, for making sure his brother made it home, he was punished severely. His superiors stripped him of his rank, they cut his pay, and they denied him all mail for the rest of his tour. It was this brutal lesson in how different the values were between the guys on the front line and the people in the rear.
You know, it took decades for the country to even begin to come to terms with the war and its veterans. A huge turning point was the creation of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, what we all know as the Wall.
For veterans like Lansford, the Wall is a really personal, almost sacred place. It brings up that haunting question that every single survivor has to carry with them. Why them, and not me? What if my name was up on that wall?
58,272. That's how many names are etched into that black granite. Each one was a life, a family, a story that was cut short. The sheer scale of that loss is it's staggering.
So, what's the real message of the Wall? Well, Lansford believes it's speaking directly to all of us, to the entire nation, and it's asking a very simple but incredibly profound question. Its silent echo asks every single generation, do we really need any more walls? Which brings us to the lasting legacy of their service. You know, physical wounds might eventually scar over, but as Lansford says, the wounds of the heart, those never really heal.
And this is the core of it all. It doesn't matter what the politics were or the protests or how the war ended. They answered the call. They took an oath to defend their country, and they did it with honor, with dignity, and with their lives on the line. And that is a truth that no one can ever take away from them.
We'll leave you with this final thought, and it's a direct request from Michael Lansford himself. It's such a simple act. It costs absolutely nothing. But for a generation that was denied that simple courtesy when they returned, it means everything. It's a recognition of a debt that was paid in full.